Thank you so much. So now from the Panchtantra, we move to cannabis. Bhang. I'm honored and privileged to be here to welcome Karan Madhok, who wears many hats. He's a translator, an author, a novelist, a journalist, and above all, someone who is consumed by wanderlust. His explorations of the length and breadth of the country led to a magnificently written book, a well-researched book, both entertaining as well as instructive, titled Ananda, an exploration of cannabis in India. So welcome, Karan.
Thank you, Lalit.
In Indian literary tradition, a lot of emphasis has been laid on traveling as a source of acquiring knowledge. So much so that there is a recurring trope that जो गधे होते हैं, गधों का शास्त्रीय पक्ष बड़ा प्रबल होता है. That's a recurring trope in Indian literature, and therefore, from Vanbhat's Kadambari to Raul Sanskrityayan's Ghumakka Shastra, princes and commoners were encouraged to travel and acquire knowledge. And in this case, in the case of Karan, his explorations have led to this book, as I said. So Karan, let me begin with a basic question. You must have responded to this question elsewhere too. When you thought of writing a book on cannabis, it might have led a few eyebrows initially. So what prompted you to write a book on cannabis? Was it your wanderlust, or was it your fascination with cannabis that led to the wanderlust?
That's a great question. Thank you, Lalit. Thank you for asking that. I knew that this is considered a quote-unquote controversial topic. But actually, it's very funny. We are in Banaras right now. In Banaras, in conversation with people in Banaras, the topic of cannabis or bhang or ganja is not very controversial compared to most of this country. Because in this city, it's a very cultural part of this city, and it has been for thousands of years. So just that juxtaposition was very interesting to me. How can the same thing in different parts of the same country evoke such varied reactions? In some places, in social circles, even saying the word ganja or charas immediately makes you branded as a capital D drug user. In some places, for example, in the Kumbh Mela, it was very well known that a lot of the Babas there were openly consuming cannabis, and it was part of the normal spiritual culture. So I don't think, the very fact that there was such a complexity behind this idea, that is what interested me. Now the other thing that interested me is that when people talk about cannabis, they normally think, I feel that the average person might normally think of it as a recreational drug use. But this plant has so many different qualities. This plant is used for medicinal purposes, is used for industrial purposes, is used to make textiles and cloth, is used to make dawai. So because of all of these things, it had within itself a lot of depth. Now abroad, a lot of people have done scientific research of cannabis, cultural research of cannabis. I felt that in India, this is a place where this plant is very much home to India. This is one of our great cultural exports, so to say, but no one has really done an in-depth study of this cultural export in great detail. So all that to say, all of that stuff interested me, but what I really wanted to do was I wanted to travel. I wanted to go out on the road, and I wanted to see new places. I wanted to revisit old places. I wanted to see places in India and how they're impacted by this plant. So for a lot of people, I think, who didn't know the backstory of this book is actually more of a travelogue than it's a scientific book or it's a cultural book. It's actually a story of me on the road, traveling and discovering new places, and then on the way, telling you a little tidbit about cannabis as well.
Thank you so much for answering this question. See, what fascinated me the most about the book was the use of myths, stories that you have gleaned not only from Indian scriptures, from archives, but also from the conversations that you had with local people, and also the legends associated with small villages. You have compiled them beautifully, you have narrated them beautifully, and that reminded me of a statement that Raja Rao had given in his classic novel Kanthapura, that every village in India has a Sthal Puran or legendary history. At some village, some people say that Ram came here, someone said that Sita dried her clothes here. So it's full of Asthal Puranas or legends. So in what ways, my next question to you would be, in what ways these Asthal Puranas, these legends shaped your narrative?
See, the legends not only shape my narrative, the legends of the past, of the Vedic era, of ancient, the ancient subcontinent, are continuing to shape so much of day-to-day life even today. Even beyond this narrative, a lot of day-to-day life, especially in Banaras, is shaped by beliefs and spiritual beliefs and traditional beliefs from millennia ago. So definitely that had an impact on the story of cannabis as well. Very famously so in the Tharv Veda, cannabis is mentioned, bhang is mentioned as one of the 5 most important elements or plants. So I think, and of course in the stories of the Samudra Manthan and a lot of stories related to Lord Shiv, cannabis is related to it. So because of that, all of that mythology did pepper into my narrative. One of the other things I wanted to do though is go beyond the mythology. I don't want to make an excuse for cannabis just because पुराने समय में किसने लिखा था. We are in the 21st century. What is the 21st century response or answer or exploration to this plant? And so I wanted to mention and respect what has been written in the past, but I wanted to make it very contemporary as well.
Thank you. Another question that you have answered in a fascinating manner once again in the book is, how did Kasol get to be known as mini Israel or Amsterdam of India? Or what led the elders in Malana to believe that they were the descendants of Alexander's army? If you could respond to these questions for the audience.
So I think what Lalit is referencing to is one of the chapters in the book, one of the early chapters in the book. I go to the Parvati Valley in Himachal Pradesh. And the Parvati Valley is very well known. It used to be known as the Apple region of India. But for many decades now, it has been known as the Hashish or Charas region of India. And a lot of illegal cannabis growth is done in these regions, and it goes all over the country. So I wanted to go to the root of these places, and there's a village in the Parvati Valley called Malana, which is very popular. The brand of cannabis from Malana is popular all over the country. But it's also a very mythical area. They have their own deity, they follow their own rules. They don't actually believe or respect the Indian government's laws that much. They say we have our own constitution in Malana, and they have their own customs and they operate in their own way. So it was one of the many places where I went to discover and find out not only what birthed the culture of cannabis cultivation in this area, but what about these people makes them so special, so different. I think one of their beliefs is that they claim that the army of Sikandar, Alexander the Great, actually came to Malana, whenever that was, thousands of years ago, and they intermingled with the locals. So they claim they're actually descendants of the army of Alexander too. So there's a lot of interesting mythologies, and these mythologies are in villages all over India. I was focusing specifically on cannabis, so I only found those, but there's so much of this from village to village all over our country.
Thank you, Karan. Now, whenever I think of cannabis, I get a bit confused, because there are so many words used interchangeably. So would you like to tell us, on a lighter note, what is the difference between bhang, charas, ganja and hashish? Do we use them interchangeably, or there are minor differences?
We live in Banaras. I assume a lot of people know. But I will still say, so the plant itself is cannabis. The cannabis is a plant. It has all of these different features. The flowers of the plant is usually the part that has the psychotropic properties, which is what people describe as jisse nasha hota hai, is what you get high from. And these fruiting tops of the plant, this is where you derive the ganja from, where you derive the charas from also. Then the leaves of this plant, when they are mushed together, that is what makes of bhang. Bhang is legal in many parts of India, depending on city to city, district to district. And then the stumps, the roots, the branches of this plant is what then eventually makes the hemp, what is called hemp. And hemp is a very strong material that is used in textiles. Hemp oil is now used in food. Hemp is now used in building materials. Just the other day, I was working with an NGO who are using hemp to make reusable sanitary pads for women in villages. So hemp is basically a very useful and a cheaper and a biodegradable substance, and it's become one of the biggest industries in the world. And this is one of the great ironies of this plant, that the same plant that gives something that is highly illegal is also now boosting one of the most lucrative industries in the planet. And that this is something that I would like there to be a more open conversation in our country about hemp. The industrial and medicinal use of hemp has been legalized in a couple of states in India. And they're checking to see, Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh are checking to see how it does and how the future changes might come to this plant.
Thank you. Now, moving to the use of colonial archives, extensive colonial archives that you have used in the text. You have cited from George Abraham Grierson, the Irish-British linguist. You have also cited from the writings of George Campbell. So there are many British authors that you have cited. So how difficult was it for you? How time consuming it was for you to go through all the colonial archives?
I mean, any project that delves into history, there are a lot of great authors here who either have written historical projects or have projects that have used some historical references, have had to take a deep dive into certain archives, into dark areas of the internet that they probably didn't think existed. So I think what I did wasn't any exceptional or anything special in that way. So I did spend the research and writing and traveling part of this book. It took about 2.5 years, and about a third of that period was the research part and going to colonial archives. Not only colonial archives, Indian scriptural archives as well.
Karan, you have also talked about at length the debate on or the demand for legalization of cannabis from the medicinal perspective, for the sake of medicinal usage. And you have mentioned about how you witnessed a group of young men and women under some NGO. They were protesting against the ban on cannabis, and they were carrying a poster which said that fight a battle against cancer with the help of cannabis. So where does Karan Madhok as an individual stand? Do you stand for the legalization of cannabis? So I would like to know your opinion on that. Where do you stand as an individual?
So there has to be more nuance and specificity to this answer, because in many ways cannabis is legal for medicinal purposes. In India, people are getting CBD medicine with some THC also. CBD and THC are two compounds of cannabis that can help for medical purposes. This is cannabis that is grown primarily in Uttarakhand, and now Himachal Pradesh is also getting into this. So it is legal for you can. A lot of people can, for their anxiety, for their pain, for sleeping issues, can get cannabis-derived medication. So in that sense, the medicinal and industrial use of cannabis in a limited way is already legal in India. Do you mean to ask me about the recreational use of cannabis? मतलब जो मजे के लिए करते हैं? Is that your question?
No, medicinal purposes.
Yeah, medicinal purpose is, and it has helped so many people all around the world for various diseases. It has
The example of Amit Vaid, who was diagnosed with stomach cancer.
It has helped people a lot with cancer-related, chemotherapy-related pains. So it has been proven by both Western allopathic medical science abroad, as well as the Ayurvedic science in India, that this is an important medicine. And it is already legal in a limited way, and I hope that more scientific research helps it open up a little bit more.
Going back to colonialism, you have written in your book that when British came to India, they levied taxes on many things, including cannabis. And you also writes about how that led to discontent among the farmers, and to some extent it contributed to the 1857 revolt against the British. So what was the story behind it?
So it wasn't exactly related. In the 1800s, a lot of you might know, the British realized the value of opium, and they realized the value of using opium almost as to weaponize opium in controlling populations. A lot of opium that was grown in India, then and Amitav Ghosh has written ad nauseum about this. It eventually went to China, it went to Southeast Asia, etc. What ended up happening was that the British, they clubbed opium and cannabis together. Not quite. Maybe they did know the difference and didn't care, or maybe they didn't quite understand the specificities of the nuances. These things were clubbed together, and in the midst they realized that cannabis has been something that Indians have been using forever. It's the way that the British person was expected to have a beer or an ale after a long day at work. The Indian person would consume cannabis, and not just consume it, but in the villages, cannabis was used, hemp was used for farming. It was used as rope to tie the animals with. So it's always been a very common part of Indian culture. So it didn't directly, of course, there were thousands of more important reasons why the 1857 mutiny happened. But one of the reasons was the high taxation on opium production, on which cannabis was also clubbed in together.
Now, let's talk about your personal life a bit, especially the character of your grandfather, which impressed me the most. You talk about Amrit, the word Amrit, nectar, and then you move on to your grandfather. So, and he wrote by the pen name of Ishrat. He was a professor, as you have mentioned. So would you like to talk about him a bit?
Yeah, I found my grandfather's legacy.
Translated his ghazals into English. You have written about it.
Yes. I found my grandfather's legacy and story working in very naturally into the theme of this book. I hadn't even planned or thought about it. The book is called Ananda, which in Sanskrit means bliss or joy. And it is directly related to a neurotransmitter we have in our own bodies called anandamide. And the cannabis plant boosts this anandamide to give us this feeling of bliss, of joy, of nasha, jo bhi hai. Cannabis was also in Hindu mythology considered to be bhang. It was considered to be one of the plants that leads to or is part of the family of plants mentioned in the Atharvaveda.
Atharvaveda. I was going to talk about Atharvaveda,
which leads to Soma. People know what Soma is. And Soma is very similar to the concept of Amrit. Amrit is the portion of immortality. So my grandfather's name happened to be Amrit. As a poet, as an Urdu poet of Shairi, he chose the name Ishrat for himself. Ishrat in Urdu means joy or bliss. So I found this beautiful circle coming back around that in seeking the Ananda of this book's theme, I found the Ishrat in the Amrit of my own family. And so of course I kept on coming back to him. His literary legacy has of course passed on to me, even though I didn't know him very well. His legacy has a very positive impact on my life.
Thank you. Any discussion on Bhang or cannabis will be incomplete in Banaras without talking about the relation between Bhang and Banaras. So we would like your opinion on that, your take on that.
My opinion about Bhang and Banaras.
Yes, the history that you have traced.
Banaras, like many other spiritual places in India, whether it's Jaisalmer, whether it's Mathura,
Since you have explored all these places,
yes,
and that's all that I could see some kind of logic behind chapterization too. The way you move from one place to another, you have explored the length and breadth of India, including Banaras.
So in the Narcotics Act of India, the Act of 1985, cannabis, recreational use of cannabis is illegal, but Bhang is given an exception because of Bhang's relationship with our spirituality and our mythology. And states and regions and districts are allowed to make their own purview on Bhang. So Banaras is one of these places because Banaras is the city of Shiva. And even cities that are influenced by the presence of Vishnu and Krishna are also often will allow government-approved legal Bhang to be made available. So in Banaras, any Pakka Banarsi will know. You walk around the city, you go to the gullies and the ghats, and it's very common. Like Bhang is very easily accessible, and it doesn't really raise that many eyebrows because it is part of the local culture. It is again, as I make the comparison, the British did not understand it. For them, it was very common to find a pub and have a beer. It was similar for the working class person in Banaras or in certain cities to do the same with Bhang. So I didn't want to over exoticize it beyond that because it is a very common and normal thing.
It's true. Would you like to read a few lines from your book for the audience?
Sure. So since we are in Banaras, I will read from the beginning of the Banaras chapter itself. It's the concluding chapter of this book. And I've called the chapter Forest of Bliss because one of the names of Banaras is Anandavan. A lot of people might know this, that Banaras at one time was apparently literally a forest. It was one of the most dense forest regions in the subcontinent, and it was a beautiful place, so it was called Anandavan, the Forest of Bliss. And this is how I begin the chapter. One of the most famous songs from the 1978 film Dawn features the megastar Amitabh Bachchan at the peak of his powers, celebrating the magic of Varanasi's popular export, the Banarsi Pan. Vijay, played by Bachchan, dances along to Kishore Kumar's words, "Khai ke pan Banaras wala, khul jaye band akal ka tala." Eating Banarsi Pan can unlock closed minds. The song immortalized the local pan industry and popularized the city's attitude of Mauj Masti. Pure fun to a national audience. But the song begins with Vijay pouring a drink for himself. If you watch the video of the song, he's pouring a drink for himself, or maybe it's for himself or his friends gathered around. And he sings under the influence of, and in the local Bhojpuri dialect, he starts singing, "Are bhang ka rang jama ho chakachak, fir lo pan chahiye." Which means once the color of bhang properly sets a sense, then chew on the pan. His needs are very simple. He is the self-anointed Chora Ganga Kinare wala. He's just a dude from the Ganga's riverbanks. Banarsis will often speak of Mauj Masti, which is a celebration of Epicurean delights, of finding time for rest and relaxation. It's an easygoing attitude that operates as a mask or a form of self-respite to face the sobering stresses of life. Academic pressure, unemployment, poverty, hunger, violence. In some cases, the attitude can slip into a state of laziness, lethargy, procrastination, or fatalism. In her article, The Night Before Bhor Aarti, Play and Banarsi Pan in the Ramnagar Ramlila, Bhargav Rani describes Banarsi Pan as a characteristic set of cultural practices, like the love of Bhari alangs, pan, bhang, ganja, thandai, a tongue-in-cheek disdain for material pursuits, and a general ease and comfort at unperturbably whiling away long hours of leisure in relative indolence and nonchalance. In Hindu belief, being born in Banaras or Varanasi is truly a stroke of divine luck. All that you need now to break the endless cycle of human reincarnation and pain is to merrily die here. Then liberation awaits you. Moksha, nirvana, a union with the Brahma, and eternal bliss. Some Banarsis tend to see the cosmically bigger picture, where this life is just the final chapter in a long string of little lives. Why take up any stress now when that eternal release is just around the corner? It's common for some Banarsis, and especially those who work at the cremation ghats, to say, "Sabke sab ghum fir ke yahin aayenge." After all the travels, everyone eventually ends up here.
Thank you so much for reading out those beautiful lines for the audience. As we are about to conclude, would you like to tell us what's next? You have already touched upon a taboo subject. What are you going to write next?
Well, what I hope is next is that this subject is not called a taboo anymore. I think let's normalize conversation about this subject and we can go from there. But yes, I'm working on a fiction project. My first book was a novel. I'm working on another fiction project as well. And I'm here in Banaras to now understand and study my own city a little bit more and hopefully produce a new work about Banaras itself.
Thank you so much, Karan, for writing this wonderfully researched book. If time permits, we can take one or two quick questions from the audience. Yes, please ask.
Hello, sir. I was reading your book, and obviously there's one part of cannabis that is for medicinal purpose, which is understandable. But there is another part which connects it to spirituality and acts as a gateway for different states of consciousness. So in a time where mental health is a very big issue, can the cannabis help in that? And I'll add another question. So, and the commercialization of cannabis. We saw after the civil rights movement in USA, there was a big trend of hippie culture. Do you think India, where level of education is not that much, so we can move backwards to that culture also? So what is your thoughts about that?
I'll address the second part first. I think we call hippie culture because we saw people of a different race doing what Indians have already been doing. It's like the Indians have already lived that way for thousands of years, but when we saw white people doing it, we like, ye to hippies hain. So I think that is already our culture that was taken over by them, and whether or not, the Kumbh was filled with hippie culture. It was just people who look like us, so we didn't call them that, right? The first part of the question was about mental health and cannabis. My advice would be go to a mental health professional. That is the very first thing. I'm not a doctor, and I should not be giving advice about how to use any medicine, even if it is medicine that I think can be useful. A mental health professional, and especially once the taboos around cannabis as a medicine for social anxieties or other forms of anxieties becomes more normalized in India. I hope that mental health professionals will also then consider it among the other medicine that they prescribe.
Have a nice day.
So we'll take one more question since time won't permit it any more questions. So one more question. Yeah, we have 4 minutes. Sorry, I didn't notice the timer.
This time is looking at
Jain,
me.
so I'm Govind from Sunbeam Bhagwanpur. Quite inspiring novel of yours, a book of yours of not seeing this cannabis system as a taboo word from now. So my expeditions to some foreign novelists like Fyodor Dostoevsky, specifically speaking, right, The Idiot, The Brothers of Karamazov mentions this word cannabis as specific multiple times. And Fyodor Dostoevsky on page number 193 mentions that cannabis is, not in your book, sir, not in your book. He mentions that cannabis is an instrumental drug for the artist. And standing in a literature festival like this, I think it's quite evident for us to understand these topics more. But sir, he was thrown out of a thinkers gathering when he attended one in South America, flying for the first time, when he talked about cannabis for the first time. Do you have any thoughts for this?
So, if I got it right, you said he was thrown out because he said cannabis is a drug for the artist. Is that what he said?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is an instrumental drug
Instrumental
for the
drug for the artist. This is about the third or fourth time, by the way, while I'm talking about this book in the various few months, that I've been asked about the relationship between artists and cannabis use. In my opinion, it's an excuse, because I feel that if a lot of people who are not real artists might think ki, if I use cannabis, now the art will suddenly flow out of me and I will become a creative person. It does not work like that. I think what cannabis does to a person is...
Quite affirmative, that is.
I think what cannabis does to a person is that whatever their focus might be in life, whatever their subconscious desire might be, it puts it to the forefront. So if someone's subconscious desire or focus is in creating art, if someone is truly an artist who cannot do anything but create art, then I'm sure it will help them. But if they don't have it in them, then they're just escaping whatever the real thing is. Whatever the real aptitude is, they're trying to run away from it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can take one more question. I think I had 2 sessions in a row, so I lost track of time.
Jai Hind, sir. Sir, I'm Shani from the school, Sunbeam English School, Bhagwanpur, and my question is divided into 2 parts. So, sir, you have visited a lot of places, from the valleys of Arunachal to the Ghats of Varanasi. Was there any particular place that caught your attention and you would further like to explore more about that place? And secondly, my question will be that while exploring the whole nation and discovering new things, why did you choose a topic like cannabis? And that is a topic that is actually a very taboo topic. So, thinking and deciding to go over that topic which has not been discussed in a nation like India, how did you come up with that idea?
So the second part of the question, I think, kind of answered itself, because it's an important topic in India. The former Narcotics Commissioner of India actually had estimated that about 60% of districts in India have some form of wild cannabis growth. 60%. It's all over the country, and yet people haven't really talked about it so much. So I think it was among the many other reasons why I was interested. It was just an obvious thread to sort of, or thread of curiosity to chase, to find something that is common yet not so well known in the mainstream in some ways. And the first part of your question was about which place left an impact on me. I absolutely loved going to the Northeast. I had never been to the Northeast before. I have traveled extensively around India even before this trip, but this was the first time I actually spent time. I spent time in Nagaland and Manipur, and the people there were absolutely wonderful. The food was incredible, the culture was incredible, and I really liked going out. And I really felt like I was discovering India all over again, and it sort of brought that excitement and curiosity back into me. So I would definitely want to go back there and learn more. Yes.
Okay, please ask. Be brief. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Please.
इसको कौन अंदर आने दे दिया?
भाई को सब अंदर आने If you could describe your entire experience of writing this book in one word, what would it be?
Ananda.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Please give Karan a big round of applause for writing such a wonderful book in a lucid prose. Prose is really lucid. It's hilarious, entertaining and instructive both, as I said at the outset. Thank you so much, Karan.